in fact, if under the right light, we could probably see the rays projecting from your godlike head, and I would imagine that all of the Marines under your command would agree with that, would they not?
There's no doubt. I actually meant it was a feature of birth, but we can go with yours as well.
Well, either way, it's a reasonable explanation.
Right
All
on.
right, welcome to the podcast. We're here with Mac Ward. Mac is a starting strength coach in the hinterlands in North Carolina, out on the Emerald Coast, as they call it. He's the owner of what do you call again the
So we're Crystal Coast
Strength and Conditioning, but the CrossFit affiliate is
CrossFit
Emerald Isle. Emerald Isle. That's what I was trying to think of. And it's a beautiful resort area out on the Atlantic coast. And Mac is a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps and is in charge of a lot of expensive equipment for reasons that are beyond my ability to comprehend, and a lot of guys too. Hey,
and gals.
You sold your boat, didn't you?
I sold my boat and
That's
I bought
good.
a new one the same day.
That's the best thing you could possibly have done. We'll
Well,
leave that for the comment section.
Yeah,
right?
so the traumatic event of last summer drove me to buy a boat that didn't draft the same amount of water.
Right.
I was not the same after that.
Oh, good. I wasn't either. I'm still not. I can't feel 3 or 4 of my fingers. So Mac was telling me a minute ago about a guy that came in who had suffered a back injury in a functional fitness context, and technical errors forced us to reboot this. So I want to revisit the approach we were taking on that question. Mac had said that somebody'd come in, and I said, well, Mac, you've had some pretty decent experience with back injuries yourself, and let's talk about that. What happened to you?
So back in 2013, when I went to Afghanistan, I had a significant life change in my daily activities. I went from, an average typical day of walking that an average 46, 7-year-old guy goes through to walking roughly a mile each way with about 75 pounds of gear, which doesn't sound so awful, but it's the jumping and the twisting and the moving sideways under all that load over time with limited sleep. And throughout all that, I continued to train to the best of my ability. I can't really pinpoint how I injured my back, but I blame the day-to-day. I don't know anybody that injures their back in the gym unless they're doing functional fitness, of course.
Right.
It seems like we injure our back picking up a lawnmower and twisting sideways to throw it on the back of the truck. So that's the kind of activity I was doing, really with abandon. You're asked to do stuff, so you're jumping on and off vehicles. But essentially...
Well, and you don't think about what you're doing because there's not time.
That's right.
We've got a bunch of shit to get done here. Let's get busy and get it done. And the first thing that goes out the window is caution in a situation like that, especially in the context you were in over there.
So, to make a long story infinitely short, I felt it's, training, I felt some tweaks in my back, it kind of backed off, and then about 2-3 days later, I couldn't dorsiflex my left foot any longer. And at the time, I didn't realize what that was. And another starting strength coach, Rory, who was following along on my log, contacted me and said that, I had a serious problem. This was something called foot drop. And what I learned was that I had essentially impinged that nerve, likely due to I believe, there was no MRI available over there, but I impinged that nerve due to a bulging disc and basically shut off all of the transmission of neurons to my foot.
Nerve conduction downstream from the injury in the low back.
So that led me to And when I was, so I looked it up and found out that when you have this kind of an injury, that over the long term, if it doesn't heal itself, that you run the risk of essentially permanently injuring that pathway down to the extremities. So I got concerned. I don't want to have a permanent injury or lose use of my foot. So when I walked, my foot would slap, and I couldn't walk on my heels, which is, they like you to be able to have use of all of your limbs as a pilot. So
Yeah, it's handy.
It is.
Did
So I
you
went
have
to
any low back pain during this time?
incredible, incredible low back pain. There was, and I would learn what would make it hurt, and I wouldn't do that. But I would sometimes, I remember one instance I was sitting in my office chair, and the pain got so bad in my back seized I literally vomited. But so it would just sort of lock up, and I would stop what I was doing and let it pass, and then eventually you'd kind of work your way through it. And I think what was happening, as I look back on, is my muscles were seizing around this thing to try and keep me from impinging that
Right,
disc.
trying to keep the thing stable. That's typically what happens in a back spasm, is that there's an impingement, and your low back muscles go into protection mode, and it hurts
A lot.
a lot.
A lot. So I went to my flight surgeon, and he very rapidly deduced that I had foot drop, and they wanted to medevac me out of Afghanistan. And I was about 2 months into my 1 year deployment. I was against that, and they were originally going to send me for an MRI. There were no MRI machines there. The nearest MRI was in. So I was afraid of being sent to Germany and then having those doctors say, "You're going home." So I spoke with with my flight surgeon, and he allowed me 30 days. 30 days to get better and show some sort of improvement before he would force me to go home. And this was done after a lot of research, and we talked about it. So, the risk of a permanent injury and after 30 days was minor. It was almost so remote as not even to be really discussed. So we could risk waiting 30 days and then address the issue. What he wanted to do was have surgery on my back. So when he agreed to that, I said, "Okay, give me 30 days." And if you remember, I called you that night.
Yeah.
Or day, whatever time it was for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, I remember that call. I'm not used to getting calls from Afghanistan, and that was, and I understand your situation. A medical discharge would not look good at the end of the career, and it's not, if there was any way to avoid that, we certainly as hell needed to get something accomplished, and I think you probably got it fixed, right?
So I did. We talked, and I don't know if you remember the words or not, but you said, everything heals, or everybody heals. I don't remember, but it was
Everything heals except cancer, is what I said.
I think that's that's exactly what you said.
Everything heals except cancer.
And so with that, and I'll tell you, those words rung true in my mind. And you and I talked about a couple of different options. We talked about the STAR rehab protocol. We ruled that out because this wasn't a muscle belly injury. And you reminded me at the time about keeping the back in extension and starting light, and we kind of have to figure it out. And we had a couple emails back and forth over the next couple of weeks. But what I ended up doing was I went back to him and said, "I've got a plan." And he said, "Okay, what is it?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to back squat and deadlift."
I would love to have been in the room when you told him that. That would have been a really hilarious afternoon, I'm sure.
So to his credit, he said, "Okay, but don't do anything too heavy."
Okay, Doc.
So I said, "Well, heavy to me or heavy to you?" And he said, "Mac, don't be stupid. This is serious." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Give me 30 days." And he did. So later that afternoon, I went to the gym, and I won't go over the specifics of it, but essentially, I found that deadlifting helped the most because my back was able to remain in perfect extension. And I found that on certain days, depending on how tired I was, I had limited control over my sleep, my diet, my timing. What I was able to do during the day. I couldn't just say, "Well, I'm going to go lie down for a while." So I was forced to maintain my regular schedule. The only thing that was taken away from me was my ability to fly. So I was down for this period of time, which made it a little easier in some regard, but it also put me in a chair, which was very, very painful.
Mm-hmm.
But squatting was tough because there's a little bit of flexion at the bottom, particularly as you get heavier. If you actually go to depth, there'll be a little minor flexion at the bottom, as we know. And
Just tiny
uh,
little bit of movement. Normally, it's
and
not a problem for a guy without a back injury. It's not a problem at all. But in your situation, it would have been a problem.
it hurt. So I spoke to another starting strength coach, uh, Dr. Sullivan, and he said to me that the biggest thing that I needed to do is manage the pain. And he didn't want me to take any sort of narcotics or anything like that. Of course, they weren't available anyways, but he recommended a pretty aggressive regimen of Motrin and Tylenol alternating every 4 hours. And he explained to me something that I've explained to a number of people since then, that when the pain fires, when those little guys fire, just like your muscles, they get stronger. And if you don't get them under control, that if it's just constantly in pain, that eventually, just the smallest thing, they fire so hard
Mm-hmm.
that just drives the pain, and you've got to manage this pain.
When I had my knee operated on back in 1994, the surgeon that I had do that was one of these primitive types. He was a pretty good mechanical surgeon, but he didn't believe in pain medication. And that was the single biggest problem I had post-op from that situation was pain management. There wasn't any. And I don't know if it was I suspect it was a moral thing with him, but and he didn't really have anything to worry about with respect to pain medication because opiate analgesics don't work on me. But I remember being in the hospital on the third day after that surgery, and my parents had come up to visit, and they had me in a constant passive motion machine. You know what that thing is? That little deal that keeps your knee moving back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, I was hurting so bad that I had a seizure in the room. I had a seizure. The only time I've ever had anything like this happen. I could not control the movements of my body, and I couldn't talk. And that's how bad the pain management had gotten. There wasn't any pain management. And nurse came in and saw the situation and went and got a cc of IM Toradol, ketorolac injectable. And within about a minute, that stuff fixed it. It was an amazing deal. And right after that, they started paying better attention to pain management. But he sent me home without any kind of pain medication at all, none. And I think the thinking has really changed on that over the past several years, and pain management has become an important topic. In fact, it's become the focus of an entire field of medicine. I think they call it physiatry, and Sullivan can correct us if we're wrong on that. But I'm glad you had that advice, because it's certainly, you can't get healed up if you can't sleep.
That's right.
And in order to sleep, you've got to have the pain under control. You have to sleep, and that really has made a lot of difference recently in some of the injuries that we've had some contact with. through our organization, people are more conscious of pain management now. So how long did it take you to get back to what you would consider to be 90% using deadlifts and barbells in the weight room?
About 4 weeks. 5 weeks later, the flight surgeon cleared me to fly. So I was able to raise my toes and walk around on my heels.
Hey, that's a hell of a lot better than back surgery, isn't it?
It is. And, there was an article recently came out on starting strength about pain management.
Baraki's article. Those of you that haven't read that need to go read it right now. Stop the video, go read the article, come back and unpause the video.
Yeah, Baraki said something that an orthopedic surgeon said to me about 6 or 8 weeks ago. I'm sorry, about 6 months ago. She's working her way through starting strength. She's working her way through linear progression in our gym. And I got to speaking with this orthopedic surgeon about my back injury that I previously had and wanted to get what her thoughts were. And she said to me, if you had had back surgery, your symptoms today would be exactly what they are now without the back surgery. That's been shown time and time again.
Right.
That 1 year later, it's going to be the same.
There's not much difference in the approach, surgery or no surgery. That's absolutely
right.
true. And I think Austin talks about that in the article.
He does, and he brings up another point there about the MRIs and the direction of thought of the patient. Mm-hmm. I've got an injury now, and they become focused on this injury.
It's been diagnosed. I have a back injury. Boys and girls, and we talked about this on the podcast before, you all have back injuries. By the time you're a grown-up adult, there are degenerative changes in your spine. That's part of being a biped, and it's unfortunate, but it's true. And if you start focusing on this kind of thing and worry about what your x-ray looks like, worry about what your MRI diagnosis is all the time, you're not going to be able to effectively deal with the pain, because the perception of injury will keep you from doing the things you need to do to get it fixed. This is terribly critical. And Mac's story bears this out. I mean, with everything on the line, he deadlifted, and 5 weeks later he's fine. So what happened with the client that came in from the functional training? This is going to be a good story, I'm sure.
So before I finish this, the only bad part of the whole thing was, to add insult to injury, at the end of my recovery, I had to prove that I could pass a PFT, which includes a 3-mile run.
Right.
So I ran this 3 miles. It took me a little less than 26 minutes, which is pretty good for a 245-pound guy at the time. And
with a back injury.
My back injury immediately flared back up.
Right,
of course, I didn't say anything to the guy, but
no, you got to keep that to yourself.
Oh God! So it put me put me back into the rehab for another couple of weeks.
I think we know what caused the back injury to begin with.
No question.
Huh? Yeah.
So it's because I'm too big.
You're too strong.
Too big. So
you're too shiny on the head. That's what it is. Your head is too shiny.
That's a parent thing.
What caused the back injury?
It's bad parents.
So I want to hear the story about the functional training guy.
All right. So this client comes in, and he's been doing functional training, right. And he's walking a little funny. A friend of mine, and he said, I've lost feeling in my left leg, and I've injured my back. I said, well, what do you think happened? Were you working in the yard or what? And he said, no. I know exactly what had happened. I was deadlifting 135 pounds functionally.
Functionally? What does that mean?
It means he functionally injured his back, is what it really means. So,
how do you functionally deadlift 135?
Isn't
that a warm-up for like a 405 deadlift? What do you...
And that's it. He was actually warming up, and he didn't take it seriously. And he said he just kind of bent over and picked it up because he was just, doing whatever it was he was doing. And he said he felt it. He knew something was wrong at the time. 2 days later, he had a numb left leg, or right leg. His right leg was numb. Right. So I heard about this, and I called him in. And I said, dude, I've had foot drop, and I told him the whole story. And he looked at me and he said, wow, I really wish I'd known. This is really interesting.
Well, hey, it's been on the website. Did you tell him that? That you don't read the website? You said, buddy, what's his name? Bob? Ralph? read the website. You don't read startingstrength.com? It's on the website. I guess you talk to him like that, right?
Well, I want to keep him as a client. So what I did say was, you have 4 starting strength coaches here, a total of 3 advanced degrees. Everybody here has, there's over 100 hours of coaching. We know what we're talking about here. Why didn't you come and talk to us? And, he said, well, I went to a doctor, which is what everybody does.
He is, and after all, he is a doctor.
No, he's not a doctor. He went to a doctor.
No, the guy that he went
Yeah.
to is,
Yep.
a doctor.
And guess what he has?
He's got a bulging disc in his low back.
What else?
He's got degenerative changes in his low back. He's probably got, let me think.
One more. Decreasing.
Oh, he's got stenosis in his, so you're right. Okay. How old is this guy, just out of curiosity?
45.
Well, look, let's go back to what we talked about earlier. If you are 45 and you go to the doctor with back pain and you have an MRI, you will show degenerative changes in your low back. 100% of you will show that, whether you are symptomatic or not. Because by the time you are a 45-year-old biped, your back has started to deteriorate a little bit from the upright position. This is an irrefutable fact. If you have back pain, you will MRI positive for degenerative changes in your low back. These will then be blamed for the pain. It may or may not be responsible for the pain. But once you are diagnosed with degenerative changes in your lower back, which you already have, if you're 45, then you have back problems on paper. It's in your medical history.
Which is good for disability.
Which is really, really good for money from the government. Or it might be real, real good to get you out of a career, depending on what what your situation is. But what we're trying to tell you is that if you deadlift and squat correctly, and do a barbell approach to the rehab, most of the time, really, you'll be okay. You'll heal up. Everything heals except cancer. And how is he now?
Well, he didn't listen to me. And he's on his way to back surgery.
That happens. Well, and what happens at back surgery?
Well, in his case, they're going to fuse 2 of his vertebrae together, which I told him he will regret for the rest of his life.
Yes, he probably will. Sometimes there's a good outcome. Usually there's not.
So since I wrote that article describing my injury for starting strength, I've had, I'll estimate 8 or 9 serious inquiries about it. And I've spoken with every single one of them on the phone, I think. And 4 of them have followed back up with me, and they'll give me a couple calls. And 100% of the people that I have had follow-ups with have had what they would consider to be 100% recovery.
Right.
And in every single instance, they deadlifted and back squatted with a barbell.
But this guy's going to have surgery.
This guy's going to have surgery because he's a functional fitness guy.
Right.
And I believe had he been on the strength side of the gym, he never would have had the injury. But a lot of these guys back there are sore. They're sore all the time, as
all
you know.
The time.
And the response, it's like a disease. Well, we got to do more of it.
Right.
It's a disease. So here we are. And the point is, the guys that I get that come in, I get them to go to the strength side. If your back's bothering you, you need to properly deadlift musculature around your spinal column and quit depending on the discs to do the job that your back is supposed to do. Right. And that's to keep this thing. So, ultimately, and the second order consequences to all of that are, and I find this in my own experience and with my clients as well, that when you learn how to properly deadlift in the gym, you end up taking that into life.
Right.
So,
right.
And it prevents injuries elsewhere.
right? If you learn to set the muscles of your low back and around your abs in a way that holds your back in normal anatomical position while you're loaded in the gym, it carries over to the lawnmower. It really does. And this is just a beneficial side effect of doing barbell training. You learn how to move correctly under a load.
So the other piece of this that, that frustrates me when clients come to me and ask for help, a lot of them will get these steroid injections and they'll get these things that shut off all of that pain. And in my opinion, the Motrin Tylenol protocol is better because some pain to guide you as you work your way through recovery is necessary. If you're just shut all that off and you continue to aggravate that thing, you're going to slow your recovery.
Right. The pain is actually valuable input about position.
When monitored.
Yes.
Or controlled.
When controlled.
Right.
When kept under control. Uncontrolled pain is
horrible.
It's not a good thing. But by the same token, numbness is not a good thing either. So I think Sullivan's approach to this is quite useful. So anyway, Mac, you seem to be doing pretty well now, and I'm glad you've been able to take this experience and help other people with it, because so often, if they'll listen to you, so often this is the least invasive approach to the problem. Deadlifts are not a terribly invasive approach to the problem. Back surgery is.
I'd say they're functional.
I think they're functional. I do too. I think deadlifts are the most functional thing you can do, and I recommend them. And I'm glad that our experiences are congruent in this manner. Thanks for being with us, Mac.
Thank you, Rip.
Appreciate your work out there on the Atlantic coast. If we're invaded from the east, it's good to know that you're standing there in the way, right?
In my new boat.
Right, in your new boat. And we appreciate you being with us on the podcast. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
All right. Thanks, Rip.